She didn't call me for 10 years, until she saw me on TV as a successful businessman. The next day, my daughter knocked on the door of my mansion with a smile. "Dad, meet your grandchildren. They want to live with their grandfather for a while." She thought she had come for a chance at reconciliation, but she didn't know that I had already made up my mind. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My finger hovered over Jessica's contact photo, a screenshot I'd taken from her Facebook profile 3 years ago, the only recent image I had of my daughter. 23 minutes I'd been sitting there in my home office, the Valentine's Day card still sealed in its envelope on my desk beside me. 10 years of buying cards, 10 years of never sending them. Rain drummed against the windows of my Westlake Hills house, that steady February percussion that makes Austin feel colder than the thermometer suggests. The desk lamp cast long shadows across the framed photographs I'd arranged like stations of some personal pilgrimage. There was Jessica at 7, gap-toothed and laughing on my shoulders at Zilker Park. Jessica at 18, graduating high school, with that forced smile she wore when her mother made her pose with me. Then, nothing for years, until the screenshots began. Brandon at 4 months old, Sarah taking her first steps, both of them growing up in pixels on a screen. I picked up the oldest frame, traced the glass with my thumb. That little girl used to call me every Sunday just to tell me about her week. When did Sunday calls become monthly? When did monthly become silence? 8:47 on a Friday night. Valentine's Day evening, and I sat alone in a leather chair that cost more than my first car, in a house too big for one person, with a business worth more than I'd ever imagined possible. 62 years old and successful by every measure except the one that mattered. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I pressed the call button. My heart hammered against my ribs. Actual physical pain, the kind that makes you wonder if this is how it ends. 1 ring. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head. 2 rings. Maybe she'd be different tonight. 3 rings. "Hello?" Jessica's voice came through, flat and suspicious. "Jessica, this is Dad." The words caught in my throat. "I know it's Valentine's Day, and I thought maybe we could talk." "Seriously?" She cut me off, that sharp edge I'd come to recognize over the years. "After all this time, you think a holiday changes anything? I just wanted—" "Don't call again." The dial tone filled my ear before I could finish. I sat there, phone still pressed to my head, as if holding it there might somehow reverse what had just happened. My hand trembled when I finally lowered it, setting the device on the desk with exaggerated care, like it might explode. The silence in the room felt different now, heavier, final. I stood on legs that didn't quite feel like mine and walked to the wall safe behind the painting of Town Lake, a sunset scene I'd bought because Jessica once said orange was her favorite color. My fingers knew the combination by muscle memory, her birthday, the last numbers she'd given me willingly. Inside, the documents sat in neat folders, company and corporation papers, insurance policies. The will I'd written 5 years ago, leaving everything to Jessica and her children. I pulled them out, spread them across the desk beside those photographs. My hands steadied as I handled business papers, this language I understood, this world where actions had predictable consequences. The Valentine's card caught my eye. I picked it up, turned it over. "To my daughter," printed in gold script on the front. I opened it, read the pre-printed message about love and family, saw the blank space where I'd meant to write something personal. Instead, I reached for my notebook, the leather-bound one I used for business planning. My pen moved across the page with sudden clarity. Plan B. Tomorrow morning, I'd call Christopher Simmons. We'd handled my business legal work for 15 years. He'd know what needed to be done. The trust fund mechanics, the documentation requirements, the timeline for making everything legal and binding. I wrote these action items in bullet points, my businessman's brain taking over from my father's heart. 9:15 now. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving only the drip of water from the eaves. I closed the safe, that metallic click echoing through the quiet room. Stood there for a moment, documents still spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. I walked back to my desk calendar, picked up a red pen, circled tomorrow's date, February 15th. Drew a line to the margin where I wrote, "Begin." The Valentine's card went into the desk drawer with the other 9 I'd never sent. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I kept seeing Jessica's contact photo every time I closed my eyes, kept hearing the click of the dial tone. By 5:30, I gave up and made coffee, stronger than usual, that bitter edge I needed to cut through the fog in my head. Twice I checked my appearance in the bathroom mirror, adjusting my collar, smoothing my hair. Old habit from my corporate days, that need to look pulled together even when everything inside felt scattered. The reflection staring back showed a man who'd built something from nothing after 50, who'd proved everyone wrong about second chances. That man could handle this. The drive to my construction company headquarters took 40 minutes through morning Austin traffic. I used the time to mentally organize, to shift from grieving father to strategic planner, past the coffee shops opening on South Congress, past the construction cranes changing the skyline, past all the visible signs of a city that never stopped building. Just like me, always building, always moving forward. My office manager, Patricia, had already arrived when I walked in at 7:15. She glanced up, did a double take at whatever she saw in my face, but didn't ask. 20 years working together, she knew when to give me space. Hold my calls until 9, I told her, then get me Christopher Simmons on the line. In my private office, I spread the documents I'd brought from home across the conference table. Company valuation reports, property deeds, investment portfolios, everything I'd built from scratch, starting with that first small renovation contract when I was 52 years old. 10 years of 16-hour days, of proving that age was just a number, of creating something substantial. For Jessica. I'd always told myself it was for Jessica and her children. At 9 sharp, Patricia buzzed through. Mr. Simmons on line 1. Christopher picked up on the second ring. Donald, good morning. What can I do for you? I need to change my will. The words came out flat, businesslike. Complete revision. I want to establish a trust fund, and I need you to walk me through the mechanics. A pause. This is sudden. Everything all right? Everything's fine. I stared at Jessica's graduation photo on my desk. I'm just making some necessary adjustments. Can you see me today? I've got a slot at 2 this afternoon. Donald, are you sure? 2 works. I'll bring all the relevant documents. The drive to Christopher's office on Congress Avenue took 15 minutes in midday traffic. His receptionist showed me directly back to his corner office with its view of the Capitol building. Christopher stood when I entered, concern creasing his face. He was younger than me by 10 years, but we'd developed mutual respect through business dealings. Donald? He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Tell me what's going on. I set my folder on his desk, opened it to show the documents inside. I want to completely exclude Jessica from my inheritance. Everything goes into a trust fund for Brandon and Sarah, accessible only when they turn 25. Jessica gets nothing. No control, no access, no say in anything. Christopher leaned back, studying me. That's a serious step. Completely excluding a child from inheritance. You understand the implications? I understand perfectly. My voice stayed level. She made her choice 10 years ago. Cut me out of her life, kept my grandchildren from me. Now, I'm making mine. There could be legal challenges, Jessica might contest, then make it airtight. I pulled out another document. I've documented every attempt at contact, every unanswered call, every birthday card returned unopened. 10 years of evidence that she voluntarily severed our relationship. Christopher picked up the documentation, flipped through pages. This is thorough. I run a successful business, Christopher. I know how to document things. He set the papers down, met my eyes. What changed? Why now? I called her last night, Valentine's Day. Thought maybe... I stopped, realigned my thoughts. It doesn't matter. She made her position clear. Don't call again, she said, so I won't. But I will make sure she understands what that decision cost. Christopher was quiet for a long moment. You know I'll do what you ask, but as your attorney and your friend, I have to ask, is this really what you want? Once these documents are signed, changing your mind becomes complicated. I won't change my mind. What about Jessica's reaction when she finds out? That's the point. I pulled out my notebook, showed him the timeline I'd sketched. I want her to know, not through legal notification, but publicly. I want her to understand what she threw away. Christopher raised an eyebrow. Publicly? There are ways. I closed the notebook. But first, I need everything legally solid. Can you draft the new will and trust documents? I'll have preliminary drafts by next week. He made notes on his legal pad. We'll need to discuss trustee appointments, distribution schedules, contingency planning. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Excuse me, I need to take this. Christopher nodded, gathering papers as I answered. Mr. Butler, this is Rachel Chen from KVUE News. We're doing a segment on successful senior entrepreneurs, people who started businesses after 50 and achieved significant success. Your company came up in our research, and we'd love to feature your story. I straightened in my chair, mind already calculating. What exactly would this feature involve? An interview about your journey, your challenges, your success. We like to highlight inspiring stories, especially for our older viewers. You started Butler Construction at 52, correct? After a career change? That's right. Perfect. We'd film at your company, maybe at your home, get some personal background, really show viewers that it's never too late to start over. She paused. Would you be interested? Across the desk, Christopher watched me, curious about the sudden shift in my expression. I thought about Jessica, about social media, about making sure everyone saw. Absolutely. I pulled up my calendar. When were you thinking? We're flexible. Maybe mid-April gives us time to research and prepare questions. April 15th works well for me. 2 months to prepare everything perfectly. 2 months to make sure every word, every image, every carefully crafted message would reach Jessica. Wonderful. I'll email you the details. Thank you so much, Mr. Butler. I ended the call, looked at Christopher. Change of plans. I want everything finalized before April 15th. Everything signed, notarized, and legally binding. That's ambitious but doable. He studied me. What's happening April 15th? I'm going to tell my story. I stood, gathered my documents. And Jessica's going to hear every word. March moved like concrete setting, slowly but with growing certainty. 3 weeks since my meeting with Christopher, and I'd spent that time doing what I always did, working. Monthly site inspections, contract reviews, crew meetings. The rhythm of business that had saved me once before. Thursday morning, early April, I spread quarterly reports across my home office desk. Numbers told stories that emotions couldn't twist. Revenue up 18% from last year. 15 crews running simultaneously across Austin and the surrounding hill country. $2.3 million in annual contracts. And we just landed another commercial renovation downtown. I picked up my truck keys and headed out to the Westlake residential project first. Traffic on Loop 360 was light at 7:30, giving me time to think about the interview scheduled for next week. Rachel Chen had sent over preliminary questions. Standard stuff about entrepreneurship, challenges, success. Nothing I couldn't handle. The Westlake site sprawled across 3 lots where we were building custom homes for tech executives relocating from California. Miguel, one of my longest-serving crew leaders, waved as I pulled up. Framing was complete on 2 houses, and the third showed good progress despite last week's rain delays. Mr. Butler, Miguel walked over, hard hat under his arm. Right on schedule, maybe even a day ahead. That's what I like to hear. I examined the beamwork, ran my hand along smooth joints. Quality construction, the kind that made me proud to put my company name on the permits. Walking through the skeletal structure of the largest house, I remembered offering Jessica 20% partnership when she got married. She was 28 then, working in marketing for some tech startup. I'd thought maybe business could be what brought us together after her mother and I divorced. "We don't need your money, Dad," she'd said at her wedding reception, her new husband standing beside her with that uncomfortable smile people wear when they witness family tension. "We're doing fine on our own. Not money, partnership. A bridge between us built on something other than apologies and awkward phone calls." But she hadn't understood that. Or maybe she had. And rejection was the point. "Everything looking good?" Miguel's voice pulled me back to the present. "Excellent work." I clapped his shoulder. "Keep this pace up. We'll have all 3 finished before summer heat hits." The drive downtown took 30 minutes through mid-morning traffic. Our commercial project occupied a historic building on East 6th Street, converting old retail space into modern offices while preserving the original brick facade. Zachary, my head foreman, met me at the entrance. Zachary had been with me since year 2 of the company's existence. Former military, methodical, reliable. He was 58 now, gray in his beard, but still moved like a younger man. We'd built most of our reputation together. "How are the HVAC installations going?" I asked, following him through the construction zone. "Finished the second floor yesterday." He led me up temporary stairs, pointing out the new ductwork. "Electrical's running parallel, should be done by end of week." We stood in what would become a corner office, looking out over East 6th through windows we'd restored to their 1920s specifications. "You know, Mr. Butler, you really managed to create something special here. Not everyone starts from scratch after 50 and builds this." I studied the view, Austin spreading out below us, cranes dotting the skyline like mechanical flowers. "Zachary, when you lose everything most precious, all that's left is work. You pour yourself into something that can't reject you, can't walk away. Buildings stay built, contracts stay honored." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Zachary knew about my divorce, about Jessica. Not details, but enough. "Still, sir, what you've built, it's impressive. Legacy worth being proud of." Legacy. That word again. I'd be talking about legacy on TV next week, crafting careful phrases about grandchildren I barely knew. Brandon and Sarah growing up in screenshots and Facebook updates I wasn't supposed to see. Back at company headquarters, a modest office suite near the airport, I met with project managers to review upcoming bids. We had opportunities for 2 more residential developments and a church renovation in South Austin. Patricia distributed folders, and we spent 2 hours discussing timelines, material costs, crew assignments. "The church job's interesting," Tom, my senior project manager, said. "Historic designation means we'll need special permits, but the margin's good." Put together a detailed proposal. I made notes in my planner. I want to see material sourcing options by Monday. Business language, problem solving, strategic thinking. This world made sense in ways family never had. You identified issues, created solutions, executed plans, measured results. Simple, clean, effective. Driving home that evening, my truck radio played news about Austin's booming economy. The city I'd chosen for my second act had treated me well. I'd arrived here after the divorce with savings, skills, and determination. Built Butler Construction from a one-man operation to something substantial. My phone rang through the truck's Bluetooth. Rachel Chen's name appeared on the dashboard display. "Mr. Butler, just confirming for next Tuesday, April 15th. We'll film at your company headquarters in the morning, then you're home in the afternoon. Does that work?" "That works perfectly." "Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. It's exactly the kind of inspiration our viewers need." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I think it'll be a valuable story for many people, Rachel. I've got a lot to share about building something meaningful." After ending the call, I sat in my driveway for several minutes, looking at the house I'd bought 3 years ago. 4 bedrooms, office, pool, space for family gatherings that never happened, guest rooms that stayed empty. Next Tuesday, people across Austin would hear about the lonely grandfather who built an empire hoping his family might notice. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of Texas sunshine that makes everything look better than it is. I stood in my walk-in closet, considering options like a general choosing armor. Business casual, Rachel had said. Approachable, but successful. Navy blazer, light blue shirt, khakis. Nothing flashy. I wanted to look like someone who'd worked hard and succeeded, not someone showing off. Changed my mind twice before settling on a charcoal button-down instead of blue. Patricia always said charcoal photographed better. The drive to KVUE Studios on Barton Springs Road took 20 minutes. I'd rehearsed answers in my head for days, though I'd made it look spontaneous. Key messages, started over at 52, built something from nothing, hoping family legacy would matter to grandchildren I wanted to know better. That last part, casual, wistful, designed to sound unrehearsed. Studio parking lot was fuller than I'd expected. Production assistant met me at the entrance, clipboard in hand, leading me through corridors that smelled like coffee and electronics. The green room was small, comfortable, leather couch, mirror, bottled water on the table. Rachel Chen appeared 10 minutes later, all professional warmth. "Mr. Butler, so glad you're here. We'll do about 20 minutes on set, then some B-roll at your locations this afternoon. Just relax and tell your story naturally." "I'm ready." And I was. This wasn't nervousness I felt. This was anticipation. The studio itself was smaller than it looked on TV. Cameras, lights, two chairs positioned at an angle facing each other. Austin Success Stories logo on the backdrop. Rachel settled into her chair, and a production assistant clipped a microphone to my collar. "Whenever you're ready," the director said from behind the cameras. Rachel's smile brightened as she shifted into on-camera mode. "Today we're talking with Donald Butler, founder of Butler Construction. Donald, you started your company at 52 years old. What motivated that dramatic career change?" I'd practiced this answer. Authentic emotion supporting strategic messaging. "You know, Rachel, life sometimes gives you unexpected turns. After my divorce, I found myself needing to rebuild, not just financially, but personally. I'd worked in construction management for years, understood the industry, saw opportunities. My company became my new focus, my new family legacy in a way. That must have been frightening, starting over at that age. Terrifying. I let genuine memory into my voice. Everyone tells you it's too late, you're too old, stick with what's safe. But I believed I had something valuable to offer. Experience, perspective, work ethic that younger competitors sometimes lacked." Rachel leaned forward slightly. "And now, 10 years later, you're running one of Austin's most successful construction firms. Annual revenues over $2 million, multiple crews, major projects across the city. How does that feel?" "Gratifying." I paused, letting the camera catch my expression. But success means different things at different stages of life. When I started, I thought about proving myself. Now, I think about legacy, what I'm building for the next generation. "Tell us about that. What drives you now?" Here. This was the moment, natural, conversational, perfectly positioned. "I have 2 grandchildren, Brandon and Sarah. Beautiful kids. I see their photos on social media sometimes." Slight smile, touch of sadness. "We're not as close as I'd like. Family circumstances, you know how it gets complicated. But I hope someday they'll understand that Grandpa built all this for them, that everything I've created was meant to give them opportunities, security, a foundation." Rachel's expression softened, exactly the reaction I'd anticipated. "That's touching. Do you think they know how much you care?" "I hope so." I looked directly at the camera, knowing Jessica might see this, knowing she'd hear every word. Sometimes we show love through actions when words don't reach. Building something substantial, creating real value. That's my way of saying I never stopped caring, never stopped hoping we'd reconnect. The interview continued, questions about construction industry challenges, Austin's growth, advice for other senior entrepreneurs. I answered thoughtfully, professionally, but that moment about Brandon and Sarah was what mattered. That was the message I'd come to deliver. After filming, production crew followed me to company headquarters for B-roll footage. Shots of me reviewing blueprints, talking with project managers, walking through our office. Then to my house in Westlake Hills, where they filmed the exterior, my home office, the pool area, making sure viewers saw exactly how successful Lonely Grandpa had become. "This is perfect," Rachel said as they packed equipment. "Really compelling story, Donald. I think viewers will find it very inspiring." "When does it air?" I kept my voice casual, though I knew the answer. "Next Monday evening, 6 o'clock news. We'll post clips on social media throughout the week too." Social media, where Jessica would definitely see it, where her friends would see it, where everyone in Austin with an internet connection would hear about the wealthy grandfather who built an empire for grandchildren he barely knew. Walking them to their van, I felt satisfaction settling in my chest like concrete hardening. Phase 1 complete. Legal documents Christopher was finalizing. Public narrative established. Strategic positioning achieved. In the studio parking lot afterward, I checked my phone. Text from Christopher. "How did the interview go?" My thumbs moved across the screen. Phase 1 complete. I didn't explain what that meant, didn't need to. Christopher understood enough that this was strategy, not sentiment, that every carefully chosen word had purpose. Starting my truck, I pulled out into afternoon Austin traffic. Monday evening, Jessica would see her successful father on television, talking about grandchildren he hoped would someday understand his love. She'd hear about the company worth millions, the legacy being built, and she'd start wondering exactly what that legacy meant for her. Jessica Martinez, she'd taken Kyle's last name 7 years ago, stood at the kitchen counter of their cramped East Austin apartment, pouring generic brand coffee into a chipped mug. Wednesday morning meant the usual chaos. Brandon needed his science project poster board, Sarah couldn't find her left shoe, and Kyle was already running late for his shift at the automotive parts warehouse. The TV murmured in the background, morning news cycling through segments. Bills sat stacked beside the coffee maker. Electric, water, credit card minimums that made her stomach tight. Their two-bedroom apartment felt smaller every year. "Mom, I really need that poster board today," Brandon called from his room. "After school, I promise." She raised the coffee to her lips, barely paying attention to the TV until she heard a familiar voice, her father's voice. The mug stopped halfway to her mouth. On screen, Donald Butler sat in a television studio, looking polished and successful. The graphics read, "Austin Success Stories, Donald Butler, Butler Construction." "Kyle!" Her voice came out sharp. "Kyle, get in here." Revenue numbers flashed on screen. $2.3 million annually. 15 crews. The camera cut to B-roll footage of a massive house in Westlake Hills. Her father's house, apparently. Pool, office, everything gleaming. "What? I'm trying to—" Kyle appeared in the doorway, dress shirt half tucked, but stopped when he saw the screen. Jessica's hands trembled as she grabbed the remote, rewinding the segment. "Did you see this?" They watched together as her father discussed building his company from scratch. The interviewer asked about family. And there it was, her father's face taking on that practiced sadness. "I have 2 grandchildren," he said on screen. "Beautiful kids. I see their photos on social media sometimes. We're not as close as I'd like. Family circumstances, you know how it gets complicated. But I hope someday they'll understand that Grandpa built all this for them." The coffee mug slipped from Jessica's fingers, shattering against tile. Brown liquid spread across worn linoleum, but she couldn't move. "Jesus!" Kyle grabbed paper towels, but his eyes stayed locked on the television. "Your dad's living like a millionaire, and we're here in this dump." I had no idea." Her voice sounded distant. "When did he even—" 10 years ago, right after you stopped talking to him." Kyle abandoned the spill, rewinding again, watching the house footage. "Westlake Hills, those properties run $800,000 minimum." Jessica sank into a kitchen chair. The man on TV looked nothing like the father she remembered, tired, struggling, offering her partnership in a business she'd assumed would fail. That rejection felt very different now. "Does it matter when?" Kyle pulled out his phone, typing. "What matters is, he mentioned the kids. That's leverage. That's our way in." "Our way in?" She looked up at him. "Think about it. He went on TV talking about his lonely grandfather act, about hoping to connect with Brandon and Sarah. What kind of grandfather turns away his grandchildren?" Her stomach churned with guilt and excitement. "Kyle, I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. The last time he called, I told him never to contact me again. That was before you knew he was worth millions." He sat across from her, phone showing property values. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're young. Family fights happen. But he's old now, lonely, and he's got money. Why not his own grandchildren?" Brandon wandered into the kitchen. "What happened to the coffee?" Jessica forced a smile. "Accident, sweetie. Hey, how would you like to meet your grandfather?" The boy's face scrunched. "I have a grandfather?" "My dad, your grandpa Donald. He lives here in Austin. We haven't visited because, well, adult complications. But he'd love to see you and Sarah." "Why haven't we ever met him before?" "Sometimes families lose touch," Kyle interjected smoothly. "But that doesn't mean they stop caring." After the kids left for school, Jessica and Kyle sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open to her father's company website, Butler Construction, professional photos, project galleries. This was real. "We need to approach this carefully," Kyle said. "You can't just show up demanding things. It has to feel natural, like you've had a change of heart about family." "What if he's still angry?" "Did you watch that interview? The man's lonely." Kyle's finger tapped his phone. "We bring the kids, let them be sweet. You apologize, say you've regretted the distance. He melts, we're back in the picture, and when he eventually leaves his money to someone." "You're talking about inheritance." Jessica's voice dropped. "He's not dead." "No, but he's 62, and he's clearly thinking about legacy. Would you rather that goes to strangers, or to his actual grandchildren?" Kyle paced their small kitchen. "This is our chance to give our kids real opportunities. Private schools, college funds. Jessica stared at her father's face on the laptop screen, frozen mid-sentence. He looked successful, confident, nothing like the man she'd dismissed a decade ago. "When do we do this?" Kyle smiled. "Soon, but first, we prepare. The kids need nice clothes. You need to figure out exactly what you're going to say, and we need to make sure he understands this isn't about money, even though it absolutely is." "Smart woman." He kissed her head. "Your dad wanted to build a legacy for his grandchildren? Let's give him that chance." Justin's call came through Thursday morning, while I reviewed contract proposals in my home office. I'd hired him 3 weeks ago, right after scheduling the TV interview, insurance policy, Christopher had called it, though we both knew it was strategic intelligence gathering. "Mr. Butler, your daughter watched the interview segment multiple times yesterday." Justin's voice carried that professional neutrality, private investigators perfect. "She also ran several property value searches for your address and researched Butler Construction's revenue information." I leaned back in my leather chair, satisfaction settling warm in my chest. Timing? First viewing approximately 8:45 Wednesday morning. Appeared to be the replay on the morning show. Multiple rewinds, particularly the section where you mentioned the grandchildren. Property searches began around 9:30, continued through the afternoon. "Thank you, Justin. I think I'll be receiving a visit soon. Want me to maintain surveillance? For now, let me know if there's any movement toward scheduling contact." After ending the call, I sat for several minutes looking at the family photos on my desk, the old ones with Jessica, the screenshots of Brandon and Sarah, my grandchildren, who I'd seen exactly 0 times in person, weapons now, tools in whatever strategy Jessica and her husband were developing. Because, of course, there was a husband. I'd researched him, too. Kyle Martinez, 38, worked warehouse logistics, modest income, history of credit issues. The kind of man who'd see dollar signs in a Westlake Hills property address. Wednesday through Friday, I prepared the house with the thoroughness I'd bring to a major construction project. Small cameras installed in the living room, dining room, and entrance foyer. Nothing illegal, clearly visible if anyone looked closely, perfectly within my rights in my own home. Audio recording capabilities on each. If Jessica wanted to manipulate her way back into my life using my grandchildren, I'd have every word documented. Christopher stopped by Friday afternoon to review the trust fund paperwork. We sat in my home office, legal documents spread across the conference table I'd installed for exactly these kinds of discussions. "Everything's finalized," he said, tapping the signature pages. "Brandon and Sarah receive equal shares at 25. Jessica has no access, no control, no way to touch these funds. Even if she contests the will, this structure is airtight. And if she tries to claim I'm mentally incompetent, that's why we documented everything. The business success, the TV interview, the clear strategic thinking. No court would believe you lacked capacity." Christopher studied me over his reading glasses. "You really think she'll show up?" "I know she will. Probably this weekend, maybe next week. She'll bring the children, use them as emotional leverage, apologize for the distance, express newfound appreciation for family connection. I picked up one of the trust fund documents. She'll be sincere and sweet and calculated. And you'll let her in anyway. Of course, I want to meet Brandon and Sarah. They're innocent in all this. They deserve to know their grandfather." I set the papers down carefully. "But I'm not a fool, Christopher. My daughter chose her path 10 years ago. Now she's walking it to its logical conclusion." After Christopher left, I walked through my house with fresh eyes, seeing it as Jessica would. The visible success, custom furniture, artwork, pool visible through the windows, the space that screamed wealth and opportunity. The home of a lonely grandfather who'd built an empire with nobody to leave it to. Saturday morning, I woke early and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I went shopping for children's items. A basketball hoop for the driveway. Pool toys still in packages. Board games stacked in the hall closet. Making the house look ready for grandchildren, even though I knew exactly why they'd be brought here. My phone buzzed around 10:30. "Christopher, any contact yet?" "Me? Not yet, but soon. She's building courage." I spent the afternoon organizing my home office, making sure the trust fund documents were visible but not obvious, filed in folders labeled with the kids' names, positioned where curious eyes might spot them during a house tour. strategic breadcrumbs for the treasure hunt I knew Jessica would conduct. Sunday, I attended to details: fresh flowers in the living room, the good coffee beans, extra chairs pulled up to the dining room table, every element carefully arranged to present the image of a successful man, hoping for family connection, while cameras recorded from multiple angles and legal documents sat ready to protect what I'd built. Monday morning, I reviewed everything one final time: the trust fund paperwork locked in the safe, copies in Christopher's office, camera systems tested and recording, my own performance prepared, the welcoming grandfather act, genuine desire to meet grandchildren mixed with appropriate guardedness toward the daughter who'd rejected me. Justin called again at noon. "Mr. Butler, your daughter purchased children's clothing this weekend. Saturday afternoon, department store in the Domain. New outfits for both kids. She's staging them, making them presentable for grandfather." That would be my assessment. Also noticed her practicing what appeared to be a speech in her car yesterday, sitting in a grocery store parking lot, talking to herself in the mirror. Poor Jessica. All this preparation to manipulate a man who'd been 3 moves ahead since Valentine's Day. She thought she'd discovered an opportunity. She had no idea she'd walked into a carefully constructed trap. "Maintain observation," I told Justin. "Let me know when they make their approach." Tuesday afternoon, my phone showed a message notification. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, Austin Mobile. "Dad, this is Jessica. I know it's been a long time. I saw your interview last week, and I've been thinking Brandon and Sarah would really like to meet their grandfather. If you're open to it, maybe we could visit? This week sometime?" I stared at the message for several long minutes. There it was, the bait taken, the hook set, the fish swimming exactly where I'd predicted. I could almost see her composing this message, Kyle standing over her shoulder. My fingers moved across the keyboard. "Jessica, I'm glad you reached out. I would love to meet Brandon and Sarah. How about Saturday afternoon, say 2 o'clock? Looking forward to finally spending time with my grandchildren." I hit send, then immediately texted Christopher. "Phase 2 begins Saturday. Make sure you're available Sunday morning. I'll need legal counsel immediately afterward." His response came quickly. "Already cleared my schedule. Donald, are you sure about this?" I've never been more certain about anything. Setting the phone down, I looked around my office at the evidence of my success, the foundation of my strategy. Jessica thought she'd found a weak spot, a lonely old man desperate for family. What she'd actually found was a businessman who'd spent 2 months preparing for her predictable greed. Saturday, my grandchildren would walk through that door, and their mother would learn exactly how expensive her decade of rejection had become. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of clarity that makes everything feel significant. 2 o'clock approached while I sat in my home office, laptop open to business reports I wasn't actually reading. My eyes kept drifting to the security camera feed in the corner of my screen. Driveway empty, street quiet, everything waiting. I'd spent the morning making final adjustments: fresh flowers in the living room, lemonade in the refrigerator, the basketball hoop I'd installed conspicuously visible from the front entrance. Every detail calculated to present the image of a grandfather who'd been preparing, hoping, ready for family he'd been denied. The cameras were recording, audio active, everything documented, everything legal, everything within my rights as a homeowner, protecting his interests. At 13:58, a Honda Civic turned into my driveway. Not new, not impressive, exactly what I'd expected Jessica could afford. I watched on the camera feed as she sat in the driver's seat for 30 seconds, gathering courage or reviewing her script. 2 small figures in the back seat, my grandchildren, visible for the first time as more than social media pixels. I closed the laptop, stood, adjusted my collar, took one deep breath, the way I would before any major business negotiation. This was theater, performance, strategy. But beneath all that calculation, my heart hammered against my ribs with something I hadn't expected. Genuine anticipation. The doorbell rang. I let 3 seconds pass, 4, 5, then walked to the front entrance with measured steps, composing my face into an expression of pleased surprise. Opening the door felt like stepping into a photograph I'd constructed from screenshots and imagination. Jessica stood on my threshold, older than the daughter I remembered, wearing a nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. And beside her, clutching her hands, 2 children who had my daughter's features mixed with genes I'd never met. "Dad, Jessica's voice carried rehearsed warmth. "These are your grandchildren, Brandon, Sarah. Say hello to Grandpa." The boy, 12 years old according to my research, stepped forward with tentative confidence. "Hi, Grandpa Donald." My throat tightened. "Brandon, Sarah." I crouched to their eye level, genuine emotion breaking through my careful control. "You've both grown so much. I've wanted to meet you for such a long time." Sarah, the younger one, smiled wide. "Mommy says you have a really big house." "I do, sweetheart." Standing, I gestured inside. "Would you like to see it? Please, all of you, come in." They crossed my threshold, Jessica with calculating glances at the marble entryway, the original artwork on walls, the visible evidence of wealth she hadn't known existed, the children with simple wonder at space and grandeur. "This is beautiful, Dad." Jessica's words dripped with studied casualness. "I had no idea you'd done so well." 10 years is a long time. I led them toward the formal living room. "A lot can change." Brandon stopped at a photograph on the hallway table, one of the few I kept visible, showing Jessica as a child. "Mom, is this you?" Jessica flinched. "Yes, sweetie, that was a long time ago." "Why don't we sit down?" I gestured to the living room where I'd arranged seating strategically, the sofa for Jessica and the children, the leather chair for myself, cameras capturing every angle. "I made lemonade, and there's cake. I thought we could talk, get to know each other." Sarah's eyes widened at the mention of cake, children's simple pleasures, uncomplicated by adult agendas. I went to the kitchen, returning with a tray I'd prepared that morning, watching Jessica's eyes track the expensive servingware. "Dad, I saw your television interview." Jessica accepted a glass, her fingers trembling slightly. "You've really built something incredible with the company." "Thank you." I poured lemonade for the children, studying their faces, my daughter's eyes and Brandon's features, my own grandmother's smile and Sarah's expression. Starting over at 52 wasn't easy, but I had strong motivation. The interview mentioned us. She tried to sound casual. Brandon and Sarah. It was surprising to hear. Was it? I met her eyes directly. "I think about you both every day. Your birthdays, holidays, watching you grow up through photographs I'm not supposed to see." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Brandon looked between us, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite identify. "Grandpa, why haven't we met before?" The question I'd been expecting, the one Jessica had probably dreaded. "That's a complicated question, Brandon. Sometimes families lose touch for reasons that seem important at the time." "But you wanted to see us?" Sarah asked, innocent directness cutting through diplomatic language. "More than anything in the world, sweetheart." The truth, despite everything else. "I've hoped for this day for 10 years. We spent the next 30 minutes in surface conversation, Brandon's school, Sarah's favorite subjects, Jessica's carefully vague descriptions of their life. I played the welcoming grandfather, asked appropriate questions, laughed at the children's stories, all while noting Jessica's systematic appraisal of my home's value. She asked about the business, the house, my success, each question probing, measuring, calculating. I answered with polite modesty, watching her realize just how much her decade of rejection had cost her in material terms. "Grandpa, can we see the backyard?" Sarah pointed toward the windows overlooking the garden. "Mommy said you have a pool." Perfect timing. "I do, and a new basketball hoop I just installed. Would you like to play outside for a bit? Your mom and I have a lot of catching up to do." Brandon and Sarah jumped at the opportunity. Jessica opened her mouth to object, then closed it. Refusing would seem suspicious, controlling, contrary to her script of family reconciliation. "Just be careful near the pool," she said weakly. I led them to the patio doors, showed them the basketball, the outdoor toys I'd purchased. They ran into the sunshine with the uncomplicated joy of children freed from adult conversations. Through the glass, I could see them exploring, laughing, unaware of the confrontation about to unfold behind these walls. Turning back to the living room, I let the polite mask slip slightly. Jessica sat on my sofa, her posture shifting from confident to defensive as she realized we were alone. "They're wonderful children," I said, walking toward my desk. "Too bad I'm only meeting them now." "Dad, I know we need to talk about—" "Do we?" I pulled a manila folder from the desk drawer, the one I'd positioned there this morning, the one containing documents she needed to see. "I think we've already said everything important, Jessica. 10 years ago, in fact. Her eyes followed the folder as I returned to my chair, sitting across from her with the kind of formal distance I'd use in a business meeting, not a father and daughter, a negotiator and an opponent. Let's discuss some new arrangements going forward, shall we? Jessica's hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white against the fabric of her dress, the new one she'd bought specifically for this visit, according to Justin's report. Through the patio windows, Brandon's laughter carried on the afternoon breeze as he attempted basketball shots. Sarah twirled near the pool, arms outstretched like she was dancing. Innocent, happy, unaware their mother's carefully constructed plan was collapsing inside this climate-controlled living room. "Dad, I understand that we haven't been in touch." Jessica's voice carried rehearsed contrition. "I know there were misunderstandings between us over the years." Misunderstandings. I opened the folder, revealing the top document, a timeline I'd prepared, dates and events listed with legal precision. "Is that what we're calling it? Let me refresh your memory, since apparently 10 years has blurred the details." I slid the paper across the coffee table. She glanced down, face paling as she recognized the catalog of her rejection. Every unanswered call, every returned birthday card, every holiday that passed in silence. February 14th, just 2 months ago. My voice stayed level, businesslike. "Valentine's Day. I called you. Do you remember what you said?" I didn't know that you... Don't call again." Those were your exact words. I leaned back in my chair, watching her squirm. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's how long that conversation lasted. I know because I sat in my office afterward and stared at the call log, wondering if I'd imagined how cold your voice sounded. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Real or strategic, I couldn't tell anymore. But I'm here now. The children wanted to know their grandfather. I wanted to fix things between us. Yes, now, after you saw me on television. I pulled another document from the folder. April 16th, you watched the interview replay. Multiple times, in fact. Then you researched my property values, my company revenue, calculated exactly how much your absent father turned out to be worth. Her face went from pale to flushed. "How do you..." "Because I'm not a fool, Jessica. I built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. Do you really think I wouldn't prepare for this moment?" I gestured around the room at the small cameras positioned high on shelves, visible if you looked, legal as evidence. "Everything we've said since you walked through that door has been recorded. Audio, video, time-stamped, admissible in any court proceeding." She stood abruptly, then sat again, trapped between fight and flight. "You're recording us? Your own daughter?" "My own daughter who disappeared for a decade and reappeared the moment she discovered I had money worth manipulating for." I kept my tone even, factual, letting the truth land without melodrama. "Tell me, Jessica, would you have brought Brandon and Sarah here if I still lived in that modest apartment? If the TV interview showed a struggling retired contractor instead of a successful businessman?" The question hung between us. Outside, Sarah shrieked with delight as Brandon showed her how to shoot baskets. Their joy contrasted sharply with the tension suffocating this room. "I wanted my children to know their grandfather," Jessica said, but her voice cracked on the word grandfather. "Your children." Interesting phrasing. I pulled out another document, the trust fund paperwork, official legal terminology, dense on high-quality paper. "Let me tell you about your children's future, Jessica. Brandon and Sarah will each receive substantial trust funds when they turn 25. Enough for college, housing down payments, business startup capital, everything I would have given them anyway, because they're innocent in all this." Hope flickered across her face. "Dad, that's..." "You, however, receive nothing." I slid the document across to her. "Zero inheritance, no access to the trusts, no control over their distribution, nothing. This was finalized 3 weeks ago, signed, notarized, filed with my attorney, Christopher Simmons. Absolutely ironclad legally." She grabbed the papers, scanning frantically. I watched comprehension dawn. The legal language she couldn't fully understand, but grasped enough to know it was real, final, designed specifically to exclude her. "You can't do this!" Her voice rose, desperation replacing calculation. "I'm your daughter. Those are your grandchildren. And you're the woman who told me never to call again." I stood, walking to the window where I could see Brandon teaching Sarah his basketball technique. 10 years, Jessica. Birthdays, Christmases, New Year's. I sent cards, gifts, letters. All returned unopened. I offered you partnership in my company at your wedding. You declined because we don't need your money. Remember saying that? Your exact words. I was young. I was angry about the divorce. You were an adult making choices, and choices have consequences. I turned back to face her, letting 10 years of accumulated pain show in my expression. Did you know I bought Valentine's cards every year? 10 of them, sitting in my desk drawer, each one signed and never sent, because I knew you'd return them like all the others. But I kept buying them anyway, kept hoping maybe this year you'd change your mind. Tears streamed down her face now, genuine grief mixing with panic. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Dad, give me another chance. We can rebuild our relationship. Can we? I sat back down, folders still open between us, like evidence at trial. Or are you sorry that I documented everything? Sorry that I've legally protected my assets? Sorry that your strategy of using my grandchildren to manipulate me didn't work? That's not... I didn't... She couldn't finish, couldn't maintain the lie under direct confrontation. Your husband Kyle researched my property values before you contacted me. You rehearsed your speech in your car in a grocery store parking lot. You bought new clothes for the children to make them presentable. This entire visit was calculated, Jessica. Strategic. A performance designed to make the lonely old man open his wallet. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Real emotion, finally. Shame, fear, the weight of being completely, thoroughly outmaneuvered. I do want a relationship with Brandon and Sarah, I continued, my voice softening slightly. They're family. They deserve to know their grandfather, deserve the opportunities my money can provide. But that relationship will be on my terms, not yours. Supervised visits, documented interactions, everything legal and protected. So I get nothing? She looked up, mascara running, the carefully constructed image destroyed. After everything, I'm just... nothing? You get exactly what you gave me for 10 years. Absence. I closed the folder, the sound final as a gavel. The children will have their inheritance when they're old enough to appreciate it. You'll have the consequences of your choices. Jessica stared at the trust documents, at the legal language that excluded her so completely. Outside, Brandon called for her to come watch his shot. She flinched at his voice. We need to discuss new arrangements, I said quietly. How often you'll bring the children here, what our relationship looks like going forward, rules and boundaries that protect everyone involved. She nodded mutely, broken, no fight left. The woman who'd walked in, confident and calculating, now sat defeated, realizing too late that she'd been playing checkers against a chess master. Through the window, Sarah waved at me, her smile genuine and bright. I waved back, heart aching with the complexity of this moment, justice served, revenge achieved, but at the cost of any reconciliation with my daughter. The price of betrayal paid in full. 2 weeks after that Saturday confrontation, I sat across from Christopher in his Congress Avenue office, signing the final documents that would lock Jessica out of my wealth permanently. The trust fund paperwork spread across his mahogany desk. $1.8 million divided equally between Brandon and Sarah, accessible only when they reach 25 years of age. Educational expenses can be disbursed earlier at the trustee's discretion. Christopher tapped a clause with his pen. Medical emergencies, housing assistance for legitimate purposes, all covered. But Jessica has no access, no control, no way to touch these funds for personal use. I initialed the final page. And if she challenges, she can try. Texas law allows trust contests, but you've documented everything perfectly. He organized the signed papers into folders. The recordings from April, the timeline of her 10-year absence, the TV interviews showing your mental competence. Any judge would see this as a strategic inheritance protection, not incompetence or coercion. Outside his window, Austin's afternoon traffic crawled through construction zones, the city growing as relentlessly as my company had grown. Building, always building, structures that lasted longer than promises. She'll fight anyway, I said. Pride, desperation, Kyle pushing her. They'll hire an attorney and make this difficult. Christopher smiled slightly. Let them. We're ready. 3 weeks later, Jessica did exactly that. Melissa Richards, a family law attorney with offices in South Austin, took her case. I knew this because Justin kept me informed. Jessica's Honda Civic photographed outside Richard's building, consultations lasting 2 hours, paperwork filed with Travis County Probate Court, challenging the trust fund structure on grounds of undue influence and parental alienation. The legal terminology amused me, parental alienation, as if I'd driven Jessica away rather than watching her choose distance for a decade. Ms. Richards is competent, Christopher told me in late May, reviewing the challenge documents in my home office. She's arguing that your trust fund structure punishes Jessica for family disagreements, that grandparents can't use inheritance to control custody arrangements. Can she win? No. He set the papers down with confidence. Not with what we have, but she'll make us prove it, which means presenting evidence formally. The summer heat arrived early that year, Texas sun turning Austin into an oven by mid-June. I spent mornings at construction sites, reviewing projects that continued thriving despite personal drama. Business never stopped for family conflict. Contracts still needed signing, crews still needed managing, buildings still rose from concrete and steel. Afternoons belonged to legal preparation. Christopher and I reviewed every recording from April's confrontation, selecting the most damning moments: Jessica's voice discussing property values with Kyle, her coached questions about my success, the children's innocent confusion about why they'd never met their grandfather before. This is the key section. Christopher played a particular audio clip, Jessica and Kyle in my living room during that first visit, their voices low but captured clearly by my security system. Kyle's whispered coaching, Jessica's nervous agreement to play up the family reunion angle, evidence of conspiracy, calculation, mercenary motivation. Melissa Richards heard these recordings in late June, sitting in Christopher's conference room with her client beside her. I wasn't present. Christopher handled the evidence presentation professionally, attorney to attorney, but he described Jessica's face when she heard herself on those recordings, the blood draining from her cheeks as her own words condemned her strategy. Ms. Richards requested a recess, Christopher told me that evening by phone. She needs to consult with her client about their legal position. Translation. Melissa realized they had no case. Throughout July, Kyle's true nature emerged like rot in foundation wood. Justin's surveillance reports showed increasing tension. Kyle's raised voice audible through apartment windows, Jessica's tear-streaked face visible when she left for work at the retail store where she'd picked up extra hours. Money pressure exposing the reality beneath their marriage. One recording Justin provided made everything clear. Kyle, drunk and angry on their small apartment balcony. "What good are you if you can't get his money? Your father outsmarted us and now we're stuck in this dump. Maybe you should just give up custody completely if you can't deliver." Jessica's response, defeated and quiet. "They're my children, Kyle. They're anchors, dead weight. We could start fresh somewhere else, away from your controlling father and his lawyers." I listened to that recording 3 times, feeling something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but sadness. Jessica had chosen this man, built a life with someone who viewed children as commodities rather than family. No wonder she'd learned to think in mercenary terms. By late July, Melissa Richards advised Jessica to accept whatever custody arrangement I offered. The legal challenge was officially withdrawn, documents filed with the county, acknowledging that Donald Butler's trust fund structure was valid, enforceable, and reflected the settler's legitimate wishes regarding his estate distribution. Christopher called me with the news while I reviewed quarterly reports in my home office. "It's over, Donald. She's agreed to meet and discuss terms, whenever you're ready." I looked at the calendar on my desk, at the photographs of Brandon and Sarah I'd placed beside my computer. They'd visited twice more since April, supervised visits where they swam in my pool, shot baskets in my driveway, talked about school and friends and everything children talk about when adults aren't using them as weapons. "August 25th, I said. 2 o'clock, my house, both attorneys present, Jessica and Kyle invited. Tell Ms. Richards we'll formalize everything then." "The children?" I hesitated, thinking about Brandon's mature questions during his last visit. Sarah's growing comfort with her grandfather. "Yes, they should be here. They're old enough to understand what's happening, and they deserve to see how adults resolve conflicts, properly, legally, without cruelty, but with consequences." Christopher was quiet for a moment. "You're sure about this approach?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The days until that final meeting passed in strange suspension. Business continued. Construction projects progressed. Summer heat baked Austin into submission. But everything felt like waiting, like holding breath before diving into water whose depth I couldn't quite measure. Jessica had lost, legally. Now came the harder question. What would winning actually cost me? August 25th arrived with thunderstorms forecast, but not yet delivered. The air heavy with humidity that made my dress shirt stick to my back, despite the house's air conditioning. I'd arranged the dining room like a boardroom, leather chairs around the table, documents stacked in precise folders, recording equipment visible as reminder and warning. Christopher arrived first, briefcase in hand, his expression professionally neutral. Everyone's confirmed. Melissa and her clients should be here within 20 minutes. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be. I adjusted the folders one final time, each labeled clearly. Trust fund documentation, custody arrangement proposal, audio, video, evidence, settlement agreement. Brandon and Sarah were in the living room, watching television with that careful awareness children develop when they know something important is happening, but haven't been told exactly what. They'd spent the previous night here, Friday sleepover, becoming regular occurrence, their toothbrushes now permanent fixtures in my guest bathroom. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. I opened it to find Jessica, Kyle, and Melissa Richards standing on my threshold like soldiers approaching surrender negotiations. Jessica looked thinner than April, dark circles under her eyes despite makeup. Kyle's expression carried barely concealed hostility. Only Melissa maintained professional composure. Thank you for coming. I gestured inside, formal host receiving unwelcome but necessary guests. Please, the dining room. We settled into assigned positions, Christopher and I on one side, Melissa, Jessica, and Kyle opposite. The children stayed in the living room, door open, close enough to hear if needed, but protected from immediate confrontation. Let's begin. Christopher opened his folder, organized and methodical. We're here to formalize custody arrangements and finalize Donald Butler's estate distribution regarding his grandchildren, Brandon and Sarah Martinez. Ms. Richards, have you reviewed the trust fund documents? Melissa nodded stiffly. We have. My client understands that the trust structure is legally sound and that challenges would be unsuccessful. Good. Then we can focus on future arrangements rather than past disputes. Christopher slid papers across the table. Donald is prepared to offer the following terms regarding his grandchildren. Jessica's hands trembled as she reached for the documents. Kyle leaned over her shoulder, reading quickly, his face darkening with each paragraph. Once monthly visitation? Kyle's voice dripped contempt. Under his supervision? That's not custody, that's prison visiting hours. It's protection, I said calmly. Protection for Brandon and Sarah from being used as leverage in financial disputes. Protection from adults who view them as assets rather than children. You can't prove. I can prove everything. I gestured to Christopher, who pressed play on the audio equipment. Jessica's voice filled the room, recorded from April. Dad's really wealthy now. The kids are our way back into his life. Then Kyle's voice, coaching. Make it seem natural, like you suddenly had a change of heart about family. Jessica's face crumbled. Kyle stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. This is entrapment. You recorded private conversations? In my own home, which is legal in Texas under one-party consent laws. Christopher's voice stayed level, professional. Everything Donald recorded is admissible evidence of mercenary motivation and strategic manipulation of family relationships. Play the rest, I said quietly. The part from July. Christopher obliged. Kyle's drunken voice emerged from speakers. Give up custody completely if you can't deliver. They're anchors, dead weight. Silence crashed into the room. Jessica stared at Kyle with something beyond shock. Recognition, maybe, of who she'd actually married. Melissa Richards looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. You recorded that too? Kyle's hostility shifted to something uglier, desperate. You've been spying on us? I hired a private investigator to monitor situations involving my grandchildren's welfare. Perfectly legal. And quite informative. I turned to Jessica, ignoring Kyle completely. You have a choice, Jessica. Accept the custody arrangement, monthly supervised visits, potential for increased contact, if you demonstrate genuine interest in the children's welfare rather than financial opportunity, or contest it and lose access entirely. Dad, her voice broke, you can't take my children from me. I'm not taking them, I'm protecting them. From manipulation, from being used as bargaining chips, from adults who value money over their emotional well-being. I pulled out another document, the settlement agreement Christopher had drafted. Sign this, acknowledge the custody terms, and Brandon and Sarah can maintain a relationship with their mother. Refuse, and we proceed to formal custody litigation, where all of this evidence becomes public record. Kyle slammed his hand on the table. This is manipulation. You're no better than you're accusing us of being. The difference, Christopher interjected smoothly, is that Donald's actions are focused on child welfare, documented legally and approved by Texas family courts. Yours are focused on financial gain and recorded admitting as much. Jessica, let's get out of here. Kyle stood, grabbing his wife's arm. He outsmarted us. Fine. We'll start fresh somewhere else, away from your controlling father and his surveillance state. Jessica looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. What about Brandon and Sarah? What about them? They're his problem now. He's got the money. Let him deal with teenage years and college applications. Kyle pulled harder. We could move to Dallas, Houston, start over without this mess. From the living room doorway, Brandon's voice cut through. Mom, is that true? Uncle Kyle wants you to leave us? Everyone froze. Brandon stood there, 12 years old and looking older. Sarah beside him, with wide, uncomprehending eyes. They'd heard everything. Kyle's contempt, Jessica's weakness, the recordings of their parents' manipulation. Son, Jessica started, but Brandon stepped back. Grandpa Donald never lied to us. He told us there were adult problems, that families make mistakes. But he never said you didn't love us. Brandon's voice steadied, mature beyond his years. Did you really only come here because you found out he had money? The question hung in air thick with humidity and truth. Jessica opened her mouth, closed it, unable to deny what her own recorded words had proven. It's not that simple, Brandon. Her voice was barely audible. Yes, it is. Sarah, 9 years old and crying, moved closer to her brother. Grandpa loves us. He bought us toys and took us swimming and asked about school. You just wanted his house. Kyle made a disgusted sound. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. Jessica, you coming or staying with Daddy dearest? The moment crystallized, choice made visible, consequences unavoidable. Jessica looked at Kyle, then at her children, then at me. I saw 10 years of decisions reflected in her face, every choice that had led to this dining room, this ultimatum, this breaking point. I'm staying, she whispered. Kyle, I'm staying. Fine. Rot here with your regrets. He walked out, not looking back. Front door slamming with finality that made Sarah flinch. Jessica sat motionless, makeup running, hands shaking as she picked up the pen Christopher offered. She signed the custody agreement without reading it again, each signature a surrender, each initial an acknowledgement of consequences earned through calculated rejection. Can I talk to them? She looked at me, not her children. Before I leave? That's their choice. I turned to Brandon and Sarah. Do you want to talk with your mother? Brandon considered, old soul in a young face, then nodded. Yeah, but here, with Grandpa nearby. They moved to the living room, Jessica following, like she was walking to judgment. I stayed in the dining room with the attorneys, giving them privacy, but remaining accessible, protection without interference. Through the doorway, I watched Jessica try to explain the unexplainable to children who deserved better. Watched Brandon's mature acceptance and Sarah's tear-filled confusion. Watched a mother realize she'd gambled with family and lost to her own greed. 20 minutes later, Jessica left, alone, defeated, free to return once monthly under supervision, free to rebuild what she'd destroyed if she found the strength and honesty for that long journey. The door closed behind her. Melissa Richards gathered her files, shook Christopher's hand with professional courtesy masking personal judgment, and departed without ceremony. Christopher turned to me, satisfaction and concern mixing in his expression. You won, Donald. Completely. Legally. Absolutely. Did I? I looked at Brandon and Sarah sitting on my sofa, looking lost despite their choice to stay. Winning feels more complicated than I expected. He squeezed my shoulder. You protected them. That's what matters. After he left, I sat with my grandchildren in the quiet house, thunder finally rumbling outside, rain beginning its delayed arrival. Brandon leaned against me, Sarah curled on my other side, and we didn't talk about custody or money or manipulation. We just sat together, family formed not through blood alone, but through choices. Mine to protect, theirs to trust. All of us building something new from ruins of something broken. Justice served, family preserved, victory achieved at a cost I'd bear willingly for their sake. The rain fell harder, washing Austin clean. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.